Egghead Island has always been one of my favorite places in the One Piece world to talk about, not only because we are just on this island right now, but because of all the potential that I see within the aesthetic of the island and what Oda can draw inspiration from, whether it's from some of our own cultures in the real world or something he just admires in the real world, like video games, books, music, etc. And personally, I think that Egghead is so rife with creativity and imagination that there's so many things that you could pull from. I wanted to do another video talking about what I think is inspiration for Egghead Island. And I know you might be thinking, you already did this super long video about Egghead, and yeah, I did do a super long video about Egghead, but guess what? It's another one now, because there's more than just one inspiration for everything in One Piece, because that's just how Oda writes his stuff. So allow me to take you down another Egghead rabbit hole that none of you probably would have ever expected, because I actually aired this theory out to a bunch of people before actually starting the scripting of this, and nobody had any idea what the inspiration of this was, which is honestly super great, because this show has actually canonically and confirmed been an inspiration for One Piece. Let's start and go all the way back to an arc that makes perfect sense with Egghead, Punk Hazard. And yes, talk about Punk Hazard in 2023. We're truly scraping the bottom of the barrel right now. I feel like Punk Hazard was one of those arcs we all experienced but rarely ever go around to re-experience. So since we're in the Egghead arc, I've obviously wanted to reread a bunch of arcs that are what I think to be integral to the Egghead experience. And obviously, with this being Vegapunk's island, this one seemed pretty important. But onto Punk Hazard in specific, we get to see that Smoker and Tashigi and all these other characters come to fruition with their own post-time skip plotline that eventually leads to Vegapunk. And obviously, I know what you might be thinking. So this is a Smoker theory then, right? Well, no, the actual important character here is Mocha. Would you believe it? Yep, the little girl is more important than Smoker right now. Who would have thought? After Dressrosa, we get a really cool scene of Smoker and Tashigi reacting to Luffy and Law defeating Doflamingo, but more importantly to this theory, we see a bunch of the kids talking to them, talking about when they're finally going to meet Dr. Decapants. And obviously that's a super funny gag for Vegapunk, and in English it doesn't translate one-to-one with it meaning big underwear. So in English, instead of Vegapunk, it's Vigapants, which is also super funny obviously and gets the point across, but I'm going to leave a little pin in that Decapants name. But I do want to say one thing in specific, which is the time that this chapter was released. This chapter was first ever released in July of 2015, and a few years later, we're going to continue the specific through line throughout Whole Cake Island with the characters of the Vinsmoke family. Obviously, with Judge and Vegapunk both being a part of Mads, it makes a lot of sense that their technological advancements would sort of mirror each other in a very interesting way. And obviously, we're going to start with Germa since we were introduced to them first. The technology of Germa is super high-tech with a hyperfixation on cloning, as well as the idea of amplifying human genetics by removing emotion to enhance pure physical strength that would be able to conquer anything and then become something that is truly worthy of the quote-unquote Germa name and rise to power once again. Throughout Whole Cake Island, we follow Sanji and learn a bunch of horrible, disgusting stuff about his family, but eventually realize that Sanji truly was the best thing that came out of his family, because he has all the raw strength and genetics that Judge wanted, while also actually being a real, fully fledged human being. And I think this is truly fascinating, because when we look at Vegapunks, they are eccentric, having these amazing little personality quirks to each one. But I want to talk about the inspiration behind Sanji and his siblings, because I thought this was truly really fascinating when I first learned about it. Back when I was younger, there was a show that was really popular, and I specifically remember watching it a lot in high school, called Osomatsu-san, which was a show about 6 sextuplets that all have their own distinct personality traits. And I thought it was incredibly fascinating to learn that Oda's daughter was such a huge fan of the show that Oda decided to make Sanji's family more like the family in the show. I thought that was really crazy, because as someone who was a huge fan of the show and now a huge fan of One Piece, I never really would have put that together. I actually made a video about this pretty much the second I found out about it, because I was so impressed this is actually a real thing that Oda was inspired by, but also because of this whole Punnett Square thing that I'm not going to get into right now. You could click the link right there, you know what's up. What I think was so interesting about this is that Oda specifically had 4 of them when the show obviously has 6 of them. That led me to thinking, why did Oda leave out 6 of them? He could have really easily done it, and Reiju has pink in her design, and one of the sextuplets is pink. You just need a purple one. That always confused me and eluded me for such a long time until we hit Egghead. Judge has always been depicted as someone who's inferior to the greatness that is Dr. Vegapunk, so I think it's perfect that Vegapunk's experiments all are incredibly distinct with very different personalities and visual differences instead of just being siblings. It allows for this connection through the Osomatsu thing that started what Germa was to be fully fulfilled with what Vegapunk was able to make. And it makes perfect sense too. When we got the trailer for One Piece Volume 106, the first volume on Egghead, they really tried to nail in the fact that Egghead is heavily inspired by Showa anime. And wouldn't you know it, Osomatsu is actually a super old product that has been around since the 1960s. Now, you could say all you want about Osomatsu being the primary inspiration for Egghead, but that I personally don't agree with. Egghead is a hodgepodge of all this crazy, insane stuff, and Showa-style anime is definitely one of them. And I personally think that Osomatsu, being a previous inspiration for One Piece through the Germa family, would be a really great through line to have inspiration in why Vegapunk has 6 versions of himself. But in case you still aren't convinced, I have one last point that I brought up earlier that I'm going to bring up now, because I really think that this has a lot of interesting connections to how Oda has set up Vegapunk's character, and how these influences from Osomatsu could have led to this arc being more inspired by it. At the end of Dressrosa, the little kids call Vegapunk Decapants, which is obviously a super funny gag, but what makes it actually kinda crazy is the fact that there is a character named Decapan in Osomatsu, and this is not like some minor character. This is a pretty huge character that consistently shows up all the time in tons of skits. And what makes this even crazier is that in a lot of these skits, he's a doctor. Like, he is Dr. Decapan. Now, do I think that this guy is the inspiration for Vegapunk? Not at all. Like, I know the struggle of thinking I know who Vegapunk's going to be inspired by. You know, you get used to it. He's Albert Einstein. But Egghead, as I said, is very inspired by Showa anime, and with these 6 versions of Vegapunk, and then this Decapants connection that he had in Dressrosa, I definitely think it's possible that Oda took inspiration from Osomatsu for a lot of the stuff in Egghead. You're telling me that One Piece is based off of some, like, weird show about, like, 6 twins? Like, but what does that mean, though? Like, how does Luffy and the plot... Yes, there is more to this than just aesthetics, and let's get into that right now. And while you see me rambling uncontrollably at the screen, how about you subscribe, guys? That would be pretty awesome. Here's the thing. Osomatsu, being an old Showa anime, is not a serialized story. It's a comedy, and a lot of the stuff in it has no plot connection whatsoever. And I personally love that this comedic aspect of old anime is seemingly one of the driving forces of the plot in Egghead Island. In Egghead, Luffy is more in his element here than he has ever been before. Not only is Luffy the strongest he's ever been, he's literally in a place that embodies what he is perfectly. Egghead is a place where anything you can imagine becomes real. And I think that's what makes this section of the story so compelling for me, because Luffy's power is imagination, and him being in a place with imagination as the main theme, I think is perfect, because it goes to show just how strong Luffy is going to be in this arc, and how this is his first ever huge stand in the New World post being a Yonko. And that has me incredibly excited for what's to come. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, but if Luffy gets away too easily, then what's the point? Where's the suspense? Where's the drama? The tragedy? Well, the tragedy of Egghead is already super obvious. We're seeing places all over the world get turned into turmoil or get wiped out entirely, and the main tragic element of Egghead is obviously Bonnie and Kuma. we had this flashback that's been established for such a long time. We're finally going to see it. We're going to see the horrors of the world government on full display. As much as people might think this is not as cool as it could be, this is Luffy's moment. This is his time. And I think it is a perfect setup for the craziness that's to come in the final saga. Like, if Luffy struggles here against Kizaru, then what is he going to do against Blackbeard or Emu? And I know that a lot of people actually want Luffy to fail right now, so he could further parallel Kid and Law, who are currently undergoing some insane stuff with Shanks and Blackbeard, but I personally think that this would just be a huge misstep on Oda's part. Luffy is clearly a step above Kid and Law, like let's be for real, and him actually failing in this regard would be a serious downplaying of everything Luffy's done in the story up to this point to become someone worthy of actually being called a Yonko by taking down 2 of them through his own determination. And yes, I know Buggy's on there too. He's worthy of it too. You gotta stop coping. Kid and Law were never gonna be Yonkos. Buggy was always number 1. You guys already know this. Like, just accept it at this point. Luffy will be able to enhance the comedic aspect of the arc like he did during his fight with Rob Lucci, evidently dog walking pretty much every opponent he has. Now, does that mean that Luffy's gonna have an easy fight throughout the rest of One Piece? People were really skeptical of that ever since he fought Kaido. Will Luffy ever have a serious fight ever again? I think he definitely will, with characters like Blackbeard and Emu, who clearly have a lot of gravitas in the story. Meanwhile, Kizaru is just saying he's a cog in the machine, and yeah, he is. He's a stepping stone to getting us into the final saga, and he's just the first one off the chopping block. And I couldn't think of a better way to invert Sabaody Archipelago than by having a scene that is so rooted in tragedy be something that's rooted in comedy. That's going to be it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I know it's been a hot minute since I've made a video, but I was so inspired by this idea of Osomatsu being an inspiration in One Piece that I thought I could possibly enhance it and lead it into some Egghead speculation. So, hopefully you all agree, and let me know what you think down below. It's been me, take care, and have a good one.